The story begins in a bar during winter where people are discussing rumors about a lunatic who has been wreaking havoc on the battlefield. They heard that after each battle, this person would disappear only to reappear in the next war. It was strange to them that a mercenary, someone who lived without purpose, would survive time and again, always whispered about by those around them. This person seemed almost like a figure from a story, fighting to settle a deep personal grudge. Some even speculated that this person was once the prince of a fallen kingdom, now searching for a place to die. The scene shifts to Yuri, the third prince of Brielle. A man stands before him, claiming that the only answer he found was self-destruction. The scene then flashes back 10 years to a casino where Yuri, along with many others, was enjoying the night. A man from a neighboring kingdom was gambling and seems on the verge of winning against the Royal Mage Hernando. However, Hernando was baffled by how Yuri always wins. Other players are equally confused. Yuri, unfazed, simply explains that it's not trickery, just luck. He then stands up, suggesting another match but with double the stakes. Hernando asked Yuri to leave as they might be late for their appointment. The other gamblers, angered by what they believed was a scam to steal their money using tricks, began to shout at them. Yuri, enraged, demanded if they even knew who he was. One man suggested that Yuri might be a noble, but they wouldn't let him off easily, claiming that all royals were the same, useless, and entitled. As they criticized the nobility, Yuri tossed all the cards aside and introduced himself as the third prince of Brielle. He declared that they would now pay for their insolence. Fear spread through the room, and in his swift, brutal act, Yuri killed them all. Later that night, Yuri met with Ekaterina, explaining that he had been late due to his father's interference. He asked her to forgive him. Ekaterina, however, pointed out that it had also been difficult for her to sneak away just to meet him. Yuri then began to share a personal story about his father's death, though he wasn't supposed to tell her. She wondered aloud why, if he didn't trust her enough to confide in her, he had given her such a meaningful pendant. In a fit of frustration, she threw the pendant away, left him standing there, and told him not to contact her again. Yuri stood there, confused, wondering what to do next. He knew that getting out of this mess wouldn't be easy. Unbeknownst to him, a man was watching him from the shadows. Since then, the balance between Brielle and the Empire reached its breaking point, and the conflict between the two nations erupted beyond all control. The entire empire of Brielle was invaded and set ablaze. People fled in panic, marking the day when full-scale war began. Countless years passed, and as sacrifices piled up, the war seemed to have no end in sight. Pipelware continued to fight for Yuri's safety. The tide began to turn in favor of the Empire, and it all seemed to hinge on the absence of one person. At first, Yuri dismissed it as a mere coincidence, unwilling to confront the painful reality. But eventually, he realized that Ekaterina's betrayal had been the key to everything. The timing of his father's absence from Brielle perfectly aligned with the Empire's ambitions and their sudden invasion. Yuri tried to dismiss his growing paranoia, but then he received a letter, apologizing for everything. He remembered standing before his burning castle, enemies closing in to kill him. He fought and killed a few, but as more enemies arrived, he knew he might not survive. He took a blow, and just as an enemy was about to finish him off, Lawrence stepped in, taking the hit to protect Yuri. Lawrence urged him to flee if he wanted to survive. Other soldiers gathered around, insisting that if Yuri fell, there would be no future for them. Yuri ran, but the enemies chased after him. He hid in a warehouse, still trying to complete his work, thinking he had to break through the encirclement and somehow survive to regroup for the future. He couldn't stop thinking about his father's condition. As a man approached him, Yuri begged him to save him, apologizing for everything. The man told him that the Empire would pay for what they had done and that the soldiers would be here soon, which was why he urged Yuri to escape. Yuri, determined to survive, held on to that hope, but in the end, everyone died. He couldn't remember what it had all been for, and all he could do was swing his sword in a futile attempt to punish himself. He even began to feel that someone would soon come to kill him. The scene shifted. Yuri was sitting outside when a man in armor stood before him, telling him that, in the end, Yuri had remained selfish. He said that death would be good for Yuri. As he called Yuri by name, Yuri was shocked. Everyone who knew his past was already dead. The man removed his helmet and revealed himself. It was Lawrence. But Lawrence had died right in front of him. So how was he standing there now? Lawrence blamed Yuri for all the cheap tricks that had ruined Brielle and shattered Lawrence's world. He was determined to kill Yuri. Yuri, however, thought to himself that he had once believed he would feel lighter when he died. But the curse of guilt still weighed heavily on him. The blood of Brielle would never abandon its honor, even if it meant death. Suddenly, Yuri awoke, finding himself in his bedroom as a young boy once again. Yuri's father mentioned that he had been sleeping for the last 3 days. Yuri was shocked as he had known his father had died earlier. Confused, he gripped his father's hand, wondering how this could be happening. His father, who had often spoken about honor, had lived a wild life. His father slapped him and told him not to speak nonsense. When Yuri looked outside, he saw nothing wrong. Everything at their castle appeared normal. His 2 brothers were also there. In the next moment, Yuri fainted, overwhelmed with disbelief. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but then he realized that he had somehow returned to the past, back to the spring of his 13th year. It was his second chance. The next morning, Ina, Yuri's maid, came in and told him it was time for sword practice. Startled, Yuri jumped up and asked for his clothes, eager to begin. He didn't want to waste time washing up. Ina calmed him down, insisting that she wash his face first. As she did, Yuri was reminded of her death in the past, a memory that haunted him. He suddenly ordered her to slap him 3 times. Shocked, Ina hesitated, but he insisted, saying it wasn't treason if he commanded it. She asked if he was sure, and he responded that he always kept his promises. After the slap, Yuri went to sword practice, still feeling the sting of it. The slap had been so hard, yet no one had offered him any comfort, not even Bernard, his sword instructor, who didn't even ask about the state of his cheeks. Bernard also didn't bother to correct Yuri's mistakes as he usually would. Yuri recalled a time in the past when he overheard Bernard telling his father that if Yuri became more diligent, he would be a true asset to Brielle. Yuri thought about how, since then, he had become so uncooperative that Bernard had given up and stopped trying to teach him. Now Yuri told Bernard that he wanted to be taught properly because he was going to take things seriously from now on. Bernard agreed, stating that they would begin real training. Without hesitation, he rushed to strike Yuri with his sword. Yuri asked him to wait for a moment. He knew that Bernard had once been known as the Sword Demon. Yuri, though injured, was still standing. He thought that if he hadn't had his mercenary experience, Bernard would have destroyed him by now. The training was exhausting, but Yuri could already feel himself improving quickly. Bernard, surprised by Yuri's resilience, remarked that he had truly grown. Just then, Ina arrived, calling Yuri and informing him that the king wanted to see him. Yuri wondered why his father was calling him. Ina explained that Count Johannes and his son had arrived. Yuri recalled that, in the past, Johannes' son had betrayed him by helping the enemies infiltrate Brielle. Anger flashed across his face as he asked where that boy was now. Yuri sat at the table with his two older brothers, his father, Johannes, and Goth sharing a meal. Johannes remarked that Yuri had truly changed. His physique had improved greatly. However, the king felt that Yuri might have eaten something wrong. Johannes then suggested sharing his improvement with Goth, who was still lacking in that department. Goth, sensing Yuri's glare, met his eyes. One of Yuri's brothers asked if something was wrong between Yuri and Goth. Yuri simply responded that Goth had stepped on him in the past. His brother teasingly asked if Yuri was going to be great now. Yuri thought that Goth was rolling his eyes and his behavior hadn't changed at all. Yuri couldn't shake the feeling that this was all for Goth's sake. He reminded himself that his life couldn't be the same as it had been before. In the past, Goth had sold out their country out of a grudge. After the meal, Yuri, his brothers, and Goth headed to the garden. There, Yuri handed a stick to Goth, taking one for himself, and said that the kingdom didn't need narrow-minded knights. Goth was destined to become a knight who would strive for the kingdom's future. Yuri rushed into the duel, landing a solid hit on Goth and even kicking him. Goth, struggling, urged Yuri to uphold chivalry. Yuri simply dropped his sword, rushed forward, and kicked Goth, making him stumble back. He then pointed Goth's sword at him and asked why Goth, who was the son of a great count and a respected knight, thought that his title and position meant anything. Yuri thought to himself that he knew Goth didn't want to live like this. He helped Goth to his feet and asked if that question was so difficult. There wasn't a single knight with such bad thoughts, including Yuri himself. Yuri pressed further, asking why Goth's father was a count who had given him that power, and when it caused the situation that arose from that day. He told Goth to look deeper, to understand the essence of it all, and to think carefully about his words. Goth agreed and left. Yuri's brother then commented on how good Yuri was at fighting. Yuri asked if his brother thought he would lose, to which his brother agreed. Yuri asked what he really thought of him, and his brother called him the biggest troublemaker and gambler in the kingdom. He then added that Yuri wouldn't be like that anymore, so his brothers shouldn't cause any more trouble. His brother wondered if Yuri had truly gone mad. As evening fell, Yuri continued practicing swordsmanship with Bernard. Exhausted, he lay down on the ground. Bernard approached and told him that it should be enough for today, and that it was time to learn the mana method. Yuri asked if Bernard would teach him his own method. Bernard refused, saying it wouldn't be on Yuri's level. Instead, he said Yuri should learn the Brielle method, which was an excellent approach to mana, pure, efficient, and powerful. Yuri thought to himself that he had mastered this in his first life and developed it to a decent level as a mercenary. Bernard then asked if Yuri was thinking about something else. He recommended looking at some good royal guards whose aptitude aligned more with their current skills. After a moment of thought, Bernard suggested that Gerard was exceptional if they were only considering aptitude. Yuri remembered meeting Gerard at the very end of the war. It was surprising that he had survived for so long, given how hopeless the situation had been. Gerard had always been skilled, and in the past, he had even said that he would train to the point of death if he could go back in time. Yuri thought about how, when the war came, both he and Gerard had become like thoroughly rusted swords. He wondered how to approach Gerard now. Deciding that he needed to knock some sense into him, he asked Bernard if they could pay a visit to the slacker knights. As the knight leader observed everyone practicing, Yuri approached, wanting to see how things were going. The man replied that while they might not be as great as him, they were doing their best. Yuri looked around at the others, who were clearly motivated, and then asked about Gerard. The man pointed toward Gerard, the new recruit. Yuri now understood what Bernard had meant. The point of training was to push their own limits, but Gerard was only doing just enough to get by. Yuri asked the man Rosov to bring him a wooden sword because he wanted to spar. Rosso agreed, asking who he would be sparring with. Yuri replied that he wanted to spar with the lazy one, Gerard. As they stood facing off, the other knights laughed at Gerard. Yuri, however, respected him and told him he had heard Gerard was talented, so now it was time to show that talent and not disappoint him. Yuri rushed to attack, but Gerard struck back with ease. His movements were clean and precise. Yuri noticed something felt off. It was too consistent, almost as if Gerard was adjusting to his pace. They both realized that it was essentially just a performance. Yuri then asked to do it properly. Yuri attacked, only to find that Gerard blocked his strike with beast-like reflexes. Yuri continued to strike, but Gerard dodged every blow, casually saying he was going to take it easy. Then Gerard managed to land a strike on Yuri. Yuri realized that it was no use. He didn't stand a chance against Gerard. However, he still pushed himself, determined to land at least one hit. Finally, he managed to strike Gerard. Feeling a sense of accomplishment, He smiled and said that it's more like it. The onlookers were amazed, commenting that the prince was truly impressive, landing a hit. Yuri remarked that Jared wasn't going to let him win. Jared agreed, feeling as though he was being cornered despite being the one pressing the attack. Yuri struck again, but it was a close call, narrowly missing Jared. Frustrated, Jared's anger flared, and he prepared to use his mana sword against the third prince. The onlookers urged Yuri to brace himself. The attack came from Yuri's side, and the crowd wondered if Yuri was okay. Yuri, unfazed, simply asked if that was Jared's first time sparring seriously. He then tied a cloth around his arm, saying that now it was getting fun before telling Gerard to continue. There was no reason to stop now. The two continued to clash swords, and Gerard began to realize that Yuri was different. He was pushing his limits, driving himself past his own breaking point. Gerard felt as though his body was on fire, an intensity he had never experienced before, not even when sparring against opponents stronger than him. Yuri was stirring something deep inside him. As Yuri rushed to attack, Gerard swiftly dodged and countered, even breaking Yuri's sword in the process. Yuri stopped, acknowledging that the match was over and admitting that he had learned something valuable from Gerard. They shook hands, and Gerard appreciated Yuri's gesture. He felt a level of intensity and determination he had never encountered before. As Gerard reflected on the moment, Yuri asked what he was doing, wondering why Gerard was simply standing there, holding his hand without saying anything. Gerard apologized before walking away. The other knights, impressed by Yuri's performance, gathered around asking when the captain had arrived. Captain Saiyan noticed Yuri lying on the ground, his expression thoughtful. A few days later, as Gerard walked through the corridor, Yuri approached him and asked if he was off duty. He invited Gerard to come with him as they had somewhere to go. Gerard mentioned that he still had training to attend to, but Yuri insisted that it was thanks to him that Gerard had come to his senses, and now he owed Yuri a favor. Gerard agreed, but Yuri sensed that Gerard's posture had tightened slightly, still reflecting some hesitation. Gerard wondered where they were headed, fearing it might be something dangerous. Yuri reassured him not to worry, explaining that he was bringing one more person along. He then called out to Hernando, the Royal Mage. When Hernando approached, Yuri told him they had somewhere to go and asked for his assistance. Hernando replied that he had some pressing business to attend to. Yuri, undeterred, offered to clear Hernando's gambling debt in exchange for his help, insisting that everything he had lost to Yuri in the past would be forgiven. He even assured Hernando that if he had ever lied to him, he would make things right. Hernando denied any wrongdoing and claimed he had never seen Yuri outside the gambling den. Yuri, however, was firm, stating that he would settle everything and insisted that Hernando follow him. Hernando, after a brief pause, pulled out a piece of paper and asked Yuri to put it in writing. Yuri smirked, dismissing the need for formalities. He mentioned that the name of the third prince was worth much less than Hernando might think. He then turned to Gerard and assured him that he vouched for Yuri and would testify to his words. After Gerard agreed, Hernando, seemingly satisfied, asked that, so now let's get going. Curious, Gerard asked where they were headed with both a royal knight and a mage in Tao. Yuri responded that they were going to Sword Mountain. From there, they will raid the Founder's dungeon. They entered the dungeon with Gerard leading the way. Hernando remarked that he hadn't known a path like this existed beneath the royal palace. Gerard asked what lay at the end of the cave. Yuri replied that it leads to Sword Mountain. Gerard wondered aloud if that was the place surrounded by the countless legends about the Founder. Yuri nodded, recalling his past when he had first heard about the dungeon's discovery at Sword Mountain. He continued that currently it was merely a part of an escape. Back then, survival was all that mattered. Now he was not just trying to escape, and he was moving forward, not looking back. You will see for myself the legacy my ancestors left behind. They soon emerged into a forest, and Hernando, looking around, wondered if Sword Mountain started from there. He then asked Yuri where to find the key for the door ahead. Yuri reminded him it's stuck in the corner of the study. He paid a heavy price for not understanding its purpose in the past. He added that Hernando didn't need to know the details. As they moved forward, spikes suddenly sprang from the walls, narrowly missing Hernando's hand. Yuri warned him to be careful and follow closely. Hernando, slightly puzzled, called out to Gerard, asking that had Yuri eaten something strange lately. Gerard felt the same tension, and just as he was about to speak, Yuri shouted at them, asking if they were coming. He then signaled them to stop, pointing out that a pack of direwolves was ahead, and there might be even more within the pack. He knew this because he had read about them in a book. Hernando was surprised, asking if Yuri had actually been reading. Yuri nodded and suggested to let's pass them quietly. But, as if on cue, Hernando accidentally stepped on a stick, snapping it, and the wolves immediately turned to attack. Gerard reacted swiftly, killing the nearest wolf with a clean strike to the head. Yuri remarked that the wolf's fur was extremely tough, advising them to use mana to deal with it, and then praised Gerard for his quick actions. However, their battle had caught the attention of the pack's leader. As more wolves surrounded them, Gerard told both of them to stay close. Two wolves lunged at him, but he swiftly sliced them down. Hernando, clearly impressed, remarked that, as expected from the royal guards of Brielle. Yuri agreed, but reminded them that there's still a long way to go. He then turned to Hernando and said that it's time for Is to show the skills that Yuri's father holds in such high regard. Hernando summoned fire and directed it at the wolves, using it to scorch and fend them off. After they had slain the remaining wolves, Yuri commented that he didn't expect there to be more monsters beyond the direwolf pack. Gerard mentioned that they were delayed a bit because of the wolves, but they had finally arrived at the peak of Sword Mountain. However, there was nothing particularly special around them. Yuri agreed and began searching the area. After a short while, he discovered a stone they needed to pull out. Gerard asked Hernando for help. Hernando, examining his hand, commented that a wound on a man's hand was a disgrace. Once they managed to move the stone, they uncovered a sword. Hernando felt as though it had been buried there for ages. Yuri looked at the sword, his expression thoughtful, as though he could sense something hidden in its history. Jared, realizing what they had found, remarked that it was the legacy of their ancestors. But Yuri didn't share any further thoughts on it. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake. Yuri, sensing something was wrong, wondered aloud if they had triggered something. The earth cracked open, and all three of them were plunged into the darkness below. Yuri fell on Gerard and wondered if he had used his body to protect Yuri by employing the mana method. Hernando created a light, his expression thoughtful, as he realized it was more complicated than he initially thought. He then asked Yuri if he had ignored the prince's safety just to protect himself. Hernando replied that it was an urgent situation. He had just heard a sound and pointed in the direction, claiming that he saw something there. Yuri didn't look, telling him that trying to change the subject wouldn't work. Hernando insisted it wasn't like that, but that there was a ghost. Yuri turned and saw a Death Knight. He asked Gerard to get up, but Gerard, exhausted, didn't respond. So Yuri hit him to rouse him. Gerard got up, confused about where they were, and then spotted the knight. He immediately went on guard, telling Yuri to stay back while he handled it. Yuri believed the knight was a Death Knight, stronger than it had been in life. He reassured Gerard that it wasn't dangerous, as he could sense its purpose. Yuri knew that the knight was guarding the dungeon or their ancestors, so there would be no reason for it to be hostile to someone of their bloodline. He introduced himself, saying, Yuri Brielle. Just then, the knight unsheathed its sword and prepared to strike. Hernando called out to Yuri, warning him that it was dangerous. The knight's sword was stabbed into the ground, and Hernando couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the prince's head split in half. Yuri warned him to watch his words, but Hernando remained stunned, still unable to comprehend how the hair had been split so cleanly. The knight spoke, his tone disdainful, saying that the prince's arrogant attitude reminded him of someone. Yuri asked whom the knight was referring to. The knight named Eric Brielle. Hernando explained that Eric Brielle was a figure no one could forget. He was the peerless swordsman who conquered the continent with a single sword and the founder of the Brielle kingdom. Eric had also been its first king. Yuri then asked the knight if he was the first to come to this place. The knight confirmed, saying that unless one was a descendant of Brielle, they couldn't draw that sword. Yuri realized that it was the supreme treasured blade used by his ancestors. The knight then remarked that he had wielded it in the past. Yuri, feeling regret, apologized for touching something that wasn't his. The knight asked why he had come. Yuri replied that he wished to inherit the legacy of his ancestors. The knight turned, stating that the time had come for him to fulfill his duty and that he would give Yuri what he sought. Yuri followed the knight, while Gerard muttered in disbelief. It seemed nonsensical to him that they had come to speak to a Death Knight. This was not the life he had imagined. Yuri called out to the knight, asking what he was doing there. Gerard, reminded of the past, reluctantly decided to follow Yuri. They drew closer to the blue shining crystals, and the knight sat down, hopeful that Yuri would prove worthy. Suddenly, a light enveloped them, and Yuri found himself transported to an open area, holding a sword. He looked around and saw a figure, wondering if it was the founder. But then he realized that the figure was not human, and it lunged to attack him. Yuri quickly understood that it was the Man of Sword. Yuri realized that the figure was demonstrating how to wield mana and expected him to copy it. He chuckled, thinking that their founder must have been insane. Was there really trying to train someone who hadn't even learned the mana method yet? Only someone with a second life could think like that. Yuri touched the ground, feeling the mana, but he was still confused and asked to try again properly. The figure ahead of him smiled, and Yuri thought to himself that he had to become stronger. He was filled with anger. No matter what it took, he would crush all the bad guys and never repeat the same mistakes from the past. He then mentioned that this was the swordsmanship of Eric Brielle. He prepared to strike the sword alongside the figure, determined to absorb everything from this lesson. Meanwhile, Gerard opened his eyes on the training ground, looking around in confusion. It didn't feel like a dream. He called out, asking why someone was hiding. Suddenly, a figure appeared, and Gerard realized it was a copy of himself. He asked if the man was also Gerard. The copy responded, telling him not to defy his fate. The royal guards always lived a comfortable life, but he warned Gerard to stay away from the princess, as it would only lead to more misery. Gerard thought back to a time when he had agreed with a copy of himself, but now he disagreed. He knew that once a sword was swung, it couldn't be taken back, and all it did was mess with his mind. The copy of Gerard drew the mana sword and rushed at him to attack. The battle began with both focusing endlessly on defense, a far cry from what Gerard had been in the past. He managed to land a strike on the copy, calling the fight boring. After the strike, he saw mud-like substance spill out from the copy, which quickly transformed into a giant, muddy creature. Gerard realized that Yuri must be in the midst of a fierce battle as well, and hoped that Yuri would be able to overcome it. Meanwhile, Yuri was struggling in his own battle against the creature. He was heavily injured, and as another strike landed on him, he remained motionless, unable to defend himself. The strike was made by Yuri as he quickly rose to counter the attack from his opponent. He then wondered how much time had passed, realizing how dangerous the situation was. He felt incredibly thankful for the chasing blade, as his life depended on it at that moment. Yuri was finally starting to get the hang of it. He noticed that his opponent's sword had broken and was disappearing in a wave. The person raised a hand towards Yuri, acknowledging and thanking him. When Yuri returned to the dungeon, he saw Deep and Gerard had also come back. The knight mentioned that it seemed like Yuri had a good dream. He explained that this was part of Eric's agreement, that something would be left behind for his future descendants who would one day arrive there. Yuri recalled that the mountain had been destroyed by the Empire in the past, which was why no one from his family had ever made it there. He then asked if the founder had used the mana method. The knight denied this, revealing that it was Eric's final legacy, created by combining the enlightenment he gained while wandering the East in his later years. This was the ultimate gift, and Yuri was the first to inherit it. Yuri questioned why this legacy had not been passed down to the royal family and why it was kept so differently. The knight revealed that the dungeon wouldn't open until the right time, and now that it had opened, it meant the time had come to use that power. Yuri wondered when exactly that moment was, but the knight didn't know either and told Yuri to figure it out on his own. Yuri then looked at the sword and asked for its name. The knight revealed that it was called Simhanchum, a name given by Eric. The knight instructed Yuri to kneel on one knee so that he could pass on the legacy of the ancestors. As Yuri complied, the Dark Knight placed a hand on him and told him never to fear his enemies. Yuri agreed, and the knight then told him to follow what he believed in to the very end and to fulfill the duty of Brielle. Yuri agreed to all of it. The knight, acting in anger, grabbed Yuri's hair and warned him to remember that Brielle would never abandon its owner even if it cost their life. That was the oath of Brielle. With those words, the knight disappeared. One morning, Yuri was awakened by Ina. As she looked at his face, Yuri asked if he was tired because he had come in late. He replied that he had stopped by the royal archives the previous night to search for a certain record. He believed he had found that Eric had a sibling who abandoned their honor and disappeared beyond the veil of history, leaving behind not even a name. Yuri felt that the person must have been the Death Knight and the original owner of the sword. Ina asked him to change his clothes because the king was looking for him. Yuri wondered why, but Ina didn't know. The king had asked to see him immediately after his meeting with Hernando. Yuri recalled that last night Hernando had mentioned he would report everything to the king the next time they met because he felt it was necessary. Yuri felt as if everything had already been reported to the king. When he met his father, the king expressed that sneaking out of the palace was bad enough, but Yuri had gone even further. He had found the founder's dungeon at Sword Mountain and discovered a sword there. Lately, the king had been hearing a lot of talk from others about changes in Yuri, and he asked him to explain what exactly had changed. Yuri didn't respond immediately. His father pressed, asking if he wouldn't say anything. Yuri finally replied that it wasn't that he didn't want to talk. Kater then asked why he looked so troubled, his hand clenched, and urged Yuri to speak. Yuri finally shared that he had a dream in which he had committed a great sin. His father, now more serious, asked what exactly he had done in that dream. Yuri replied that in the dream he had failed Brielle to the very end. The dream showed Brielle caught in a great war with countless people massacred. Yuri tried to turn things around but ultimately failed. After the kingdom fell, he ran away in disgrace without honor and met a miserable end. When he woke up from the dream, he noticed that the necklace his mother had given him was burning, and at that moment, he thought the dream might have been a warning from his mother. His father asked what had destroyed the kingdom in Yuri's dream. Yuri thought it was too soon to mention the Empire, and besides, at that point in time, as he was changing the past, there was still a chance that the Empire's invasion might never happen. Yuri said he wasn't sure, but it seemed to be a black army of unknown origin. His father then mentioned that whether it was a nightmare or a warning from Yuri's mother, he was glad that Yuri had gathered his resolve. Yuri wondered about that, feeling that he was merely desperately struggling to be forgiven for his sins. His father agreed, but then added that there was one more thing they needed to address. He asked Yuri to bring the sword. Yuri's father, Brielle, was a genius who had held a sword from the moment he could walk. He earned every single title of first, engraving his name across the continent with his astounding martial prowess. Yuri thought that, at that time, there was a concept of the top 10 strongest people on the continent, and among them, his father was considered the one closest to the top. In other words, he was regarded as the greatest sword master of the continent, far beyond anyone's reach. Yuri was taken to his father's personal training hall, a place he had never visited before. His father stated that none of his sons had the talent for the sword. Yuri believed that he did have some talent with the sword. His father then drew his own sword and pointed it at Yuri, asking what exactly a swordsman's talent was. Was it natural strength, speed, reflexes, or maybe exceptional instincts? He wondered if Yuri had all of those traits, and if so, would that make him a swordsman? However, his father denied that idea, adding that more important than all of that was something that drove a person to push beyond their limits. That was something that went beyond the mere danger of the sword. Was a sense of duty. Yuri felt that his father's energy had shifted. His father put the sword away and said that he didn't know how to describe the sword's calling, but it was something that transcended simple explanation. Yuri wondered if it was like destiny. His father replied that it might be. Yuri thought that in the past he was not destined to walk the path of the sword, but now he wondered what his destiny was. His father approached him, asking if he should hold the sword, if he should hear the sword's calling, and if even at the moment of death, he would still have the sword in his hand. Yuri replied that he didn't feel anything. He only saw his father, who seemed frightening, and heard voices telling him to run away. He even heard someone asking for help. The scene reminded him of the past where people were being killed and he stood there alone. He wondered why Brielle was burning. Enemies were coming to kill him because he was the last remaining prince of Brielle. Yuri recognized that those were the Imperial army. He then wondered if he had returned when Brielle was being destroyed. Someone attacked Yuri from behind, and he struck back with his sword, killing the attacker. Just then, his army arrived, telling him they should stop the enemies and urging Yuri to take the lead and run from there. Yuri wondered if he had seen this in his dream, and whether Brielle was truly destined to fall helplessly. He thought it couldn't be stopped, but then he rushed into battle with them. He had already made a vow never to fear his enemies. He remembered the words of the Death Knight, to do what he believed in and fulfill his duty to Brielle to the very end. He fought fiercely, killing enemies one by one, dodging their attacks as he went. Just then, someone shouted that Yuri was a dead man and should give up. Filled with rage, Yuri infused his sword with mana and declared that Brielle would never throw away its honor. even if it meant death. With that, he landed a powerful strike, thinking that until the end he would fulfill Brielle's duty. Suddenly, he found himself back in the place where he had been standing before, with his father calling him. Yuri looked around, recalling the vision of the Black Army. His father told him to calm down, assuring him that it was all just an illusion. Yuri turned his focus back to the sword. His father mentioned that he had been wrong and Yuri was going to take up the sword. Yuri agreed, telling his father that he had made his decision. His father made a different face and Yuri felt that anyone who saw it would think that he had just signed his own death sentence. He grabbed his father's hand and reassured him, telling him not to worry because, after all, he was a genius. His father simply raised his hand as if to strike Yuri on the head. After that, Yuri began his sword training with a new injury on his head. Bernard asked who had done that, and Yuri replied that it's his father. Bernard commented that the king seemed to have been feeling generous toward him, but he wasn't going to go easy on Yuri's training just because of it. Yuri understood, thinking that Bernard had stayed in Brielle because of Yuri's father. He then asked Bernard if he had stayed there on the condition of a duel with Yuri's father. Bernard agreed. However, Yuri told him that even if Bernard didn't get to duel with his father, he would still want Bernard to stay. Bernard denied it, saying it sounded like Yuri wanted him to stay, and if Yuri could show him something tempting enough, he might consider it. Like the swordsmanship of the founder, Eric. Yuri asked if Bernard wanted to learn that technique. Bernard replied that he was a bit curious about it. Yuri responded that it might be difficult and mentioned that it seemed to suit Bernard considering his nickname, the Sword Demon. Bernard reassured him that it was fine even if he didn't master it completely, and that he had taken that into account. Yuri agreed, adding that it wouldn't be very helpful to Bernard since swordsmanship was deeply connected with the mana method. Yuri demonstrated the mana sword, explaining that the two were intertwined. Bernard admitted that he had never heard of anything like that before, as mana methods were typically used to enhance swordsmanship, not the other way around. Yuri confirmed this, explaining that this was why it was so difficult to pass on and would always remain incomplete. Bernard agreed, but said that even if it was incomplete, he was willing to accept it and would work hard to adapt it to Brielle's conditions. He was confident there would be at least part of it he could understand. Yuri noticed Bernard's confidence and then reminded him that he would be staying in Brielle, as they had agreed. Bernard nodded and drew his sword, asking Yuri to simply show him the technique. Yuri agreed and prepared his sword to demonstrate. Bernard mentioned that he hadn't said it before, but he had been planning to stay in Brielle. Yuri was shocked by this revelation, and Bernard then asked if he wasn't going to attack, stating that he would be the one to start. Yuri, frustrated, angrily questioned why Bernard hadn't mentioned it earlier before rushing forward to strike, telling him that he hadn't been informed of this plan. Later, Yuri lay in his room reflecting on the situation. He realized that it wasn't Brielle that had perished because of his mistakes, but rather a different future, one that was slowly shifting. Although he hadn't taken any concrete action yet, Bernard's decision to stay in Brielle proved that change was already happening. The process of altering the future always felt uncertain and ambiguous, but it was undeniable that things were evolving. Yuri understood that this change wasn't enough on its own, and now he had to stop the Empire. He was determined to do so. Just then, Ina asked him not to cause any trouble. Yuri wondered what she meant and whether he had other plans. She pointed out that he caused trouble every day and questioned whether he even knew what she was talking about anymore. More importantly, she reminded him that he had a meeting the next day, an Elders' Council meeting. His father had said that he would be joining it. Yuri had to attend first thing in the morning. Most of the Elder Council members would be present, and some of them could be intimidating, strict old figures. Ina grabbed Yuri's hand and asked him not to punch anyone. He reassured her not to worry, telling her he wasn't like that anymore. She then asked him to promise, and he agreed. In the meeting, a man slammed his fist on the table, clearly angered. Yuri couldn't help but feel that Ina had been right. Opposition from the very beginning was coming from Duke Gennard, who argued that it wasn't right for the king to be learning an unverified mana method. Yuri thought back to the original purpose of the Elders' Council. It was supposed to discuss national affairs, but now it seemed to serve only as an obstacle to royal authority. He was beginning to understand why his father had avoided attending these meetings in the past. Gennard insisted that it would be far better for them to learn the Brielle method instead. Another man chimed in, defending the method as the legacy of the founder, not something unverified. Gennard shot back, questioning how they could be sure that it was truly the founder's legacy. Another council member asked if Gennard was doubting His Highness. Gennard responded by saying they needed to be certain in order to ensure everyone's safety, and questioned if they hadn't all gathered to discuss the future. Yuri replied, his tone steady, so they had gathered the entire Elders' Council just to debate my mana method. And he was honored for that. He refused to bow his head, thinking that there's no need to bow to the Emperor after Brielle fell, and now we're still speaking so smoothly. Gennard called out to Sane, asking for his opinion. Sane replied thoughtfully that he wasn't sure, and every mana method has its strengths and weaknesses, and people have different affinities for them. Gennard asked everyone if they could see the problem, pointing out that even the Royal Guard captain wasn't sure about the mana method. He argued that it was far from reliable and should be discarded as something dangerous. Another council member countered, clarifying that it wasn't what Sane had meant. Sane had said that every mana method had its own value. A man seated next to Gennard stood up, stating that the Duke was simply worried that the mana method might harm Yuri. Yuri felt the situation slipping away from him as the tide turned completely against him. He thought to himself that if he hadn't practiced the mana method yet, he could have rebuilt his core from scratch. But because of the vision from the founder, that sword had already taken root in his core, making it impossible to simply start over. Yuri couldn't explain this to them. He wondered what he should do next. Just then, Calcio spoke up, commenting that the men in the room only knew how to talk big. He then asked had any of them actually fought an orc in person. They all stared at Calcio, and Jennard asked who he was and what his rank was. Calcio introduced himself as a free baron. Jennard mocked him, asking if he was implying that he was merely a free baron and yet attending the Council of Elders. Calcio replied that he hadn't wanted to come, but what could he do? Count Sitter had delegated the responsibility to him. Yuri thought to himself that Sitter was the border count who defended the edges of Brielle, a lord who was truly deserving of his title. He fought on the front lines and was known as the real soldier for spending his life in the field. He was famous for having no interest in noble gatherings, which made Yuri wonder why he would suddenly send a representative to the council. Maine then asked what had prompted Sidor to send someone to the council. Calcio replied that he didn't want to explain himself, but seeing all the highborn nobles indulging in their armchair politics, he finally understood why the count had sent him. In his opinion, the type of mana method didn't matter much on the real battlefield, whether it was the Brielle method or the Empire's Lion Fang art. What truly mattered was the person using it. He then turned to Yuri and asked that what did he think. He wanted to learn the mana method of the founding king of the kingdom, so why was that even controversial? No matter what they all said, he intended to master the founder's mana method. Calcio remarked that the sword-bearing instincts of the prince had chosen to follow the will and method of their founder, so why were people, who held neither the authority nor the responsibility, raising their voices against it? He supposed that the scholars bound by theory and having never fought with a sword were the ones making all the noise. Jennard asked him to speak more bluntly. He apologized for his lack of manners but asked them to overlook it, explaining that when they were fighting orcs at the border every day, they had become like that. He then repeated his earlier question. How many of them had actually fought orcs? There was silence in the meeting. Jennard pressed on, asking again if they really thought those monstrous orcs cared about the mana methods. A man disagreed, saying that Calcio was completely wrong, but he acknowledged that Yuri was still young and might lack judgment. Yuri wondered if the man was implying that he had made a poor decision, and that the mana method needed to be overhauled. Did they not realize that it was impossible to change such a deep-rooted tradition? Calcio added that it didn't seem like Yuri intended to back down anyway. He then asked if they were going to forcibly tear out his core. The man grew angry, but Calcio retorted that if that wasn't the case, then what was the point of all this? He then turned to Yuri and asked if he agreed with that. And yet there they all were, seated around, damaging Yuri's mental state. It seemed the royal capital had a lot of free time on its hands. Jennard slammed his hand on the table in response to the mention of free time, calling it an insolent remark. He added by that logic the border had been quiet too, even with all the budget they were provided. Calcio glared at him, saying that it's only quiet when hunters die. And if they haven't seen the daily reports of soldiers dying out there, then they must be blind or deaf. He paused, then added that even on the day he left the border, 4 men died. One of them was a friend he shared breakfast and banter with that morning. He laid his funeral cloth by myself. His eyes narrowed. The orcs don't rest. They are a race that lives solely for battle and bloodshed. As Yuri thought about it, he remembered that there were issues between Brielle and the Klein Duchy at that time. In the chaos, the orcs had crossed the borders, causing massive destruction. Yuri then asked if there had been any changes in their movements. Calcio agreed, stating that things had been far more ominous than usual. He then inquired about Klein and the Duchy, asking if Klein had stationed troops there as well. Calcio replied that the border guard had suddenly withdrawn. Yuri then asked about the nearby border villages. Calcio responded that they were all completely destroyed, with people either slaughtered or taken as slaves. It was devastating. Yuri understood that the timing lined up and wondered if it was a civil war. He then asked if the Duke's third son had made a mistake. It all fell silent and Yuri stood up, saying that they had discussed enough for now. As he was leaving, Jennard questioned the meaning of enough discussion. Yuri replied, suggesting they move on to matters more urgent than the young man's little mana method, like the defense against Klein's Duchy, the orcs, and the need to stop focusing on a teenage boy. The scene then shifts to the room where Calcio was staying, where he contacted his leader. His leader asked what the third princess had said. Calcio responded that rumors about him suggested he was not the same as before, and his eyes didn't seem to reflect any of the supposed changes. The man mentioned that they needed to keep an eye on Yuri and instructed Calcio to investigate Yuri further. Calcio replied that there wasn't much information on Yuri yet, so they should dig deeper. The man agreed, saying he would do so if necessary and would contact Calcio again. Calcio looked out of the window, observing how peaceful it was while soldiers were dying daily at the border. Then he noticed Yuri walking through the market, and he was shocked to see him there. Yuri was walking with Hernando that night. Hernando told him that he wasn't supposed to be outside the palace just as Yuri had requested, and he found it kind of thrilling. He mentioned that he used to run away from home all the time when he was a kid. Yuri asked if he was saying he snuck out 3 times a day. Hernando agreed, laughing that he was quite the delinquent youth. Then Hernando noticed a lady staring at them, wondering if they were caught. Yuri asked Hernando if he was really that excited and couldn't leave the palace whenever he wanted. Hernando replied that if he had come alone, it would have just been a stroll, but with Yuri, it felt like a rebellion. He then asked what Yuri's plan was. Yuri responded that something was going to happen, even if it did, it wouldn't be while Hernando was around. Hernando jokingly said it hurt him, then asked where they were headed. Yuri mentioned the casino, the largest illegal casino in the capital. Hernando gave him a third look, asking that didn't he just say he wasn't going to do anything bad? He sighed, then added to just guide me and don't pretend he don't know where it was. Hernando replied that when he got blackout drunk, he didn't go home. He'd end up there instead. Yuri told him in advance that everything was for the sake of Brielle. Hernando was shocked, wondering just how much money Yuri was planning to take from them. With a grin, Hernando agreed to follow Yuri. saying to let's turn that casino upside down tonight. Yuri remembered that among the people of Brielle in his past life, there were a few names that were always on everyone's lips. One was the boss of the underworld and a notorious loan shark, Kolosak. Another was a giant of the business world who built the continent's greatest trading company. And the last was a legendary assassin who beheaded the infamous underworld boss, taking his place and turning the streets of Brielle into a land of terror. The man who was killed by that assassin, he was the one standing against Yuri now, the current greatest loan shark of the underworld, Goryo. Goryo remarked that it was an honor for such a distinguished guest to visit his humble establishment. Yuri noted that it seemed like they knew who he was. Goryo agreed, saying that with the Royal Mage and the third prince himself being present, it was only right for someone in charge to come greet them. Yuri acknowledged that it was a smart move, adding that he hadn't come there just to enjoy a bit of gambling. Goryo then suggested they sit down to talk. As they all took a seat, Hernando whispered to Yuri, wondering why he hadn't mentioned anything about gambling. Goryo mentioned that if Yuri hadn't come there to gamble, then perhaps he wanted to borrow money. Yuri agreed, telling him that he planned to use the money he borrowed to invest and build up his own private fund. Goryo asked if Yuri had even grander ambitions, considering that he wasn't taking the money from a bank, but from him. Yuri responded that it was enough and questioning him wasn't Goryo's job. Goryo acknowledged that he had overstepped and apologized. He then said that, in fact, he was the one in need of money at that moment. Goryo hesitated but decided to ask what Yuri intended to use the funds for. Yuri replied that he planned to use the money to purchase Magranza, a spice from the Climb Mountains. The supply wouldn't be able to meet demand. Hernando was surprised to hear that. Goryo commented that Magranza was certainly essential in making luxury perfumes, but he questioned whether it was worth investing that much capital. He expressed skepticism. Yuri assured him that it would happen soon enough. Hernando recalled hearing about the civil war in the Klein Principality and the orcs prowling around, but even so he doubted that the price of spices would skyrocket that much. He thought that perhaps Yuri was trying to corner the market on a rare commodity in advance. Yet the expression on Yuri's face told him that he wasn't a fool and that he knew something more than he was letting on. Goryo then asked Yuri to decide on the amount. Yuri replied that not as the Prince of Brielle, but as an investor, he wanted to know how much he could borrow from him. After some discussion, the terms were settled, and the man asked him to sign the contract. Yuri signed it, and then, along with Hernando, he left the establishment. Hernando wondered aloud whether Yuri had really borrowed money from Goryo. It didn't seem fair, especially since Yuri hadn't given any hint beforehand and hadn't planned to gamble there in the first place. Yuri replied that if he had told the truth earlier, Hernando might have dragged him to his father. Hernando then asked if they were going to the guild now. Yuri agreed, saying he had something to take care of. They explained that Magranza was already guaranteed to turn a profit. The alchemist, the only one who knew how to process it and a close aide to Duke Klain, would be the first casualty of the coming civil war. Until a replacement showed up, he could sell it at whatever price Yuri set. However, he couldn't trust just anyone with that job. They arrived at a dilapidated house, and Hernando was shocked to see such a rundown place. Yuri knocked on the door, calling out to Irene if she was inside. Hernando urged him to wait, reminding him that such work should be entrusted to the guild. A lady appeared from inside and introduced herself as Irene. Yuri introduced himself as the third prince of Brielle and mentioned that he had a job for her. After explaining the job to her as they left, Hernando asked if Yuri had really lost his mind. Yuri replied that Hernando had certainly gotten quite bold for someone speaking to a prince. Hernando retorted that anyone would say the same, especially since Yuri was going to entrust the purchase of Magranza to a rundown little shop like that. Yuri thought to himself that it was a nobody running a dilapidated trading company at the moment, but soon, Irene would become the greatest merchant on the continent, a name known to everyone. Unlike Goryo, who only spoke about trust and credit, but resorted to every dirty trick, when things got tough, Irene treated her promises to clients as though they were a matter of life and death. In Yuri's past, she had only reached legendary merchant status, but now he would make her more than a legend, a myth. Hernando asked if Yuri was done with his business. Yuri simply said he had one more thing to do. Hernando didn't feel good about it and then asked where Yuri was going. Yuri thought about the loan shark of the underworld and the great merchant. Both of them were ready to help him. Now he needed the help of just one more person. They arrived in a very poor area where people were struggling just to find food. Yuri was searching for someone, thinking they should be around there. Soon enough, he found the person he was looking for. He approached the woman and introduced himself, saying that he was the third prince of Brielle. She was the one he had been searching for, the woman who, in his past life, had brutally killed Goryo. She was none other than the legendary assassin, Asana. Asana stood up and asked why the prince had come. Yuri reassured her that there was no need to worry. He had simply encountered some children in need while on an inspection tour. He then asked Hernando for the money. Hernando handed him the pouch, and Yuri reflected on how a small child had been concerned. He thought about Asana's past life, recalling that she had borrowed a large sum from Goryo to treat a child. Much like those who had reached out to him before, Asana had fallen into ruin, which ultimately led to her becoming known as a legendary assassin. Yuri's goal was to change the starting point of that ill-fated connection. He handed the money to Asana, telling her to use it to get treated at the temple. She asked what she needed to do in return. Yuri told her there was only one thing. She had to remember his name. As he turned to leave, Hernando asked why Yuri was giving so much money to beggars. Yuri replied that it was an investment for the future. He believed these people would be crucial for what was to come, so he was drawing them into his fate. Now there was only one person left. He then mentioned that he was curious about something at the founder's relic. What had Hernando seen? Hernando explained that he had seen gambling and had risked his life playing games at the Empire's largest casino. Yuri thought it was just like Hernando to get such an appropriate welcome. He then advised Hernando to be more cautious next time. The next day, Hernando was called by King Fior, who mentioned that he had heard Hernando had left the capital with Yuri the previous day and asked him to explain what had happened. Hernando revealed that Yuri had lured him out of the palace and they had gone to the biggest casino in the capital. The king asked if Hernando was implying that they had gambled there. Hernando confirmed, saying that Yuri was extremely skilled at cards, but it didn't help much, and he even lost all the money Hernando had lent him. When the king asked what had happened afterward, Hernando explained that Yuri had taken the money he had borrowed from Goryo and handed it over to a shabby little shop with no name. He had even given a large sum of money to an orphan he had never met before. As they walked through the capital, Yuri had observed how the citizens lived and seemed very interested in how people lived. The king then asked if they had returned to the palace after that. Hernando bowed, agreeing with the king. The king paused thoughtfully before asking if Hernando would attend the upcoming ball. Hernando agreed, and the king pointed out that Hernando had previously said he wasn't interested. Hernando simply replied that people could change their minds, and he felt like dancing for once. One day, while practicing swordsmanship with Bernard, Yuri fell to the ground. As he got up, he noticed two maids nearby and remarked that he must be quite popular, as the two were sneaking glances at Bernard. Hernando then suggested he attend the upcoming ball, noting that many people would likely be waiting for him there. However, Bernard dismissed the idea, saying he wasn't interested in such things. He then commented on Yuri's sword technique, agreeing that it didn't have a fixed form. Yuri stood up, brushing himself off, and replied that it would come naturally with time. Bernard explained that the mana method was essentially a sword technique in itself, but that Yuri couldn't possibly master it just yet. To truly study it, he would need to observe Yuri in real combat. Still, Bernard was astounded by Yuri's progress. His affinity with mana was remarkable, and Bernard was genuinely impressed that Yuri had already become so proficient with it. Yuri, feeling a bit guilty, adjusted his stance and began moving his wooden sword. As he did so, he focused on erasing the traces of the Brielle method from his past life. As he concentrated, his senses sharpened. Bernard, watching carefully, urged him to take it slow, his concern clear. Yuri wondered about Bernard's words, and Bernard explained that Yuri was progressing too quickly. While his achievements were impressive for someone his age, his body was still far from fully matured. Yuri reassured Bernard not to worry, promising that he would pace himself properly. He then asked for another round of practice. Bernard asked Yuri if he was sure about this. Yuri, determined, agreed and suggested that they should use real blades, telling Bernard that he needed to get stronger quickly. Bernard drew his sword, agreeing to the challenge. Yuri proposed a bet. If he landed even one hit, Bernard would have to attend the ball. Bernard, however, refused, confident that he would win without a doubt. He also pointed out that even if they made a bet, Yuri never fully honored his promises. Yuri smirked and insisted they would see about that, then rushed in with a fast attack, determined to land a hit on Bernard. But no matter how hard he tried, Yuri couldn't land a single blow. After a few days on the day of the ball, the second imperial prince of the Empire, Jorgavana, arrived in a carriage, accompanied by a lady. He noted that the lady couldn't take her eyes off the window. The lady was Ekaterina and said that it's been a long time and she had been looking forward to this event, and there's someone she was eager to meet as well. Meanwhile, Anna was helping Yuri get ready and asked how he looked. He glanced at himself in the mirror and remarked that it was too much decoration and seemed messy. Anna disagreed, saying it looked pretty to her and that he used to like such things. She then finished getting him ready. Yuri asked Anna for a dance. She was taken aback by the request. He explained that he wanted to practice dancing but didn't have a suitable partner. She hesitated and asked if they really had to. Yuri wondered why she seemed so reluctant, then gently took her hand and assured her to don't worry. He won't step on her feet or try to trip her on purpose. He quickly denied her concern, saying to don't take him for someone who jokes around. He pulled her closer and asked her to just follow his lead slowly. Anna raised an eyebrow, questioning if Yuri was underestimating her. She added that she was actually quite good at dancing. Yuri asked if she had danced a lot before with anyone. Anna replied with a smile that she was quite popular, but it was the first time she had danced with someone that short. As they practiced, Yuri warned her to watch out since she had stepped on his foot. Despite his caution, the same thing happened again. At the ball, music filled the air and couples danced gracefully. The king, enjoying his drink, observed the scene with satisfaction. Meanwhile, Yuri and his two brothers were sitting at a table, enjoying their food. After that, Yuri noticed that Count Cider was present as well. At the previous meeting, only Arancha had attended. As Yuri looked around, he saw his brother eating and asked if his eyesight had been getting worse lately, since he had been wearing his glasses more often. His brother replied curtly that it wasn't something Yuri needed to worry about. Then the sound of a siren announced the arrival of Jorg. He entered the hall and greeted King Fior with a handshake, while Yuri stood behind his father. Fior thanked Jorg for visiting such a humble place. Jorg expressed his gratitude for the warm welcome and added that he had brought his younger sister, Ekaterina, with him. Ekaterina stepped forward to greet King Fior. Yuri watched her silently, haunted by memories of a broken past. He told himself that he must not form any ties with her again, that he would not repeat the same mistake. Never again. Two boys approached Ekaterina and tried to speak with her. Cedric, watching, commented that it was typical of her to treat people coldly, saying that it was the mark of a true monarch. The other girls nearby whispered that it seemed rude and unpleasant. Yuri happened to make brief eye contact with Ekaterina before she turned her attention to one of the boys. Yuri felt a pang of sadness and wondered why he was still lingering on a relationship that had been doomed from the start. Anna brought cookies for Yuri, and he thanked her for working so hard. She waved it off, saying it was no trouble, and compared to having to clean up after someone every day, it wasn't difficult. He told her it was more than enough and asked for more cookies. As she was leaving, she told him to let her know if he needed anything. Yuri thanked her, and as he stood there, Jorg approached him. Yuri thought to himself that Jorg had once personally led most of the battlefields on behalf of the Emperor. As they exchanged introductions, Yuri couldn't help but reflect that the man who had directly led Brielle to its downfall was now standing before him. He reminded himself to stay calm and avoid showing hostility, not yet knowing how to approach the situation. Jorg smiled and then used some sort of power on Yuri, saying that he was turning 13 this year, and he really was the son of Fior. He then walked away, commenting that Yuri was a remarkable talent. Yuri felt that the gesture was too threatening to be just a test. He thought about how young he was, yet already Jorg acted with such authority. His anger began to rise both toward Jorg and his sister Ekaterina. Just then, Ina accidentally slipped and food spilled onto Jorg's cloth. Shocked, she looked at the imperial emblem on his attire and muttered in distress that how could she commit such disrespect. She immediately began to apologize. Jorg looked at Yuri, then took out his sword, saying that it seems there's been a mistake. According to imperial law, the appropriate punishment would be execution. Yuri's anger boiled over as he realized that Jorg had deliberately provoked Ina. The injustice of it all enraged him even more. Just then, Fior approached, asking if Jorg had come to disturb the ball and if he wanted to see bloodshed. He told Jorg that if that was his intention, he should do it on his own land. Jorg shot back, saying that he had come to seek the understanding of the king of Brielle, and that both the Empire and Brielle had always respected each other's authority. Fior agreed, but then pointed out that it seemed Jorg had no intention of doing so. He reminded Jorg of the incident at Gatensha, when their majesties had executed not a knight of Brielle, but a knight of the Empire. Fior noted that respecting the authority of his majesty did not mean holding him accountable for that responsibility. Jorg responded that the matter was the same and that it was for the sake of preserving the peace and honor of both nations. Yuri thought back to when his father had personally beheaded a knight of the Empire. The fact that Jorg brought up past events and mentioned the agreement meant that the authority of the imperial family was at stake in the current situation. Jorg explained that he hadn't done it out of personal desire and suggested they resolve this quickly so there would be little bloodshed. Yuri reflected on the situation, understanding that, in other words, standing in the way of the prince now was a direct challenge to the Empire. It was a conflict of duty, ideals, and reality, where justification met force. But Brielle would not abandon its honor, even if it meant death. This was the path of Brielle. Yuri stepped forward and declared that Ina was his person, and therefore her fault was the same as his. He thought to himself that by calculating and scheming like a rat, he had momentarily forgotten his position. He continued, stating that even though his power might be small, he was of royal blood and that should be taken into consideration. Yuri reflected on his past, realizing that the life he had lived was a punishment, one he had never chosen to begin with. He then requested that the summary execution be withdrawn and instead proposed a trial by combat. Jorg began to laugh, clearly amused, and then turned to Fior, asking if Yuri, the third prince, was raising a legitimate objection. He inquired whether that would be acceptable. Though Fior was reluctant, he ultimately agreed. Jorg then informed them that typically he would face the duel alone. However, considering the dignity of the imperial family, he would bring a companion. To match Yuri's age, Jorg would send out the youngest squire from the imperial guard. He told Yuri to be prepared. Yuri bowed respectfully and thanked Jorg for showing mercy. As Jorg left, he casually remarked that they would see each other in the duel later. Yuri approached Ina, who was trembling, and gently helped her to her feet, telling her to go rest. She hesitated, wondering how she could leave when it was her fault. Yuri reassured her, asking her not to worry about him. Two other maids took Ina away. As Yuri went to get some food, he noticed Ekaterina. He dismissed the thought as useless and left without engaging with her. Hernando observed the entire exchange from a distance. Later that night, as Yuri was walking down the corridor, his brother stood in his path and asked that what were he thinking when he said that. Yuri was surprised, realizing he hadn't noticed his brother. He responded that he couldn't just stand by and watch Ina die. His brother nodded and said that now he don't have any other choice. He placed a hand on Yuri's head, offering a rare moment of comfort. Yuri felt a sense of nostalgia remembering moments like this, though it had been a long time since he had experienced it. He wondered if he should help as well. Regarding the trial, Yuri knew that although Jorg's offer of kindness seemed genuine, it was likely the opposite. If their skill levels were similar, any accident during a trial could be deadly. Yuri told his brother that he understood his concerns. His brother reassured him, saying that it would be quick and he will handle it. But Yuri insisted, refusing to back down, stating that since he caused this, so he will settle it himself. He thought that if his brother put his mind to it, he could solve the problem, but Yuri wanted to take responsibility for the situation. His brother placed his trust in him and then mentioned the ball. It was a complicated matter, but he assured Yuri he would handle it. He advised Yuri to go and get some rest. Yuri agreed, thanking his brother for his support. He thought to himself that if Brielle hadn't been destroyed by the Empire, his brother would have ruled over it. He wondered what kind of country it would have become under his brother's rule. Yuri promised himself that he would fight to win that future, no matter who the opponent might be. The time for the duel arrived, and Yuri stood facing his opponent. The crowd watched in silence as the event unfolded. Hernando commented on Yuri's sudden challenge, turning to Sane and asking what he thought of the situation. Sane observed that the opponent's stance was quite stable, and that for a squire, his skill with the sword was impressive. He remarked that the squire was truly befitting of the Empire's guard. Then he wondered aloud whether Yuri would be fine. Hernando smiled and responded, telling Sane to just look at Yuri. Yuri appeared completely relaxed, stretching out his body with confidence. Hernando assured him that there was no need to worry. The Grand Wizard was among the ranks of wizards bestowed by the Magic Tower, a position that few could ever attain. This title, granted only to those who had achieved Dakmanmato, represented a level beyond reach for most. Dakmanmato was the power that allowed one to glimpse the world's fate, to observe the mandate of heaven through a specific formula. It was a power granted by the world itself, a realm only Hernando had ever reached. This scene reminded Yuri of the time when he was playing cards with Hernando. They had been discussing various things, and Yuri quickly realized that Hernando was talking a big game. Yuri couldn't understand how he lost every round. Hernando was really terrible at the game. Hernando, however, believed that after obtaining Dakmanmato, he had taken the game seriously for the first time. And that was the moment he had lost money. He refused to believe it was a coincidence. Despite his abilities, Hernando could typically discern his opponent's hand and even their luck with just a sidelong glance. But with that kid, Yuri, nothing reflected in his eyes. And that was the figure he saw through the vision of Jiam-san, a person with black hair and eyes bearing the symbols of the Brielle royal family. Those arrogant eyes clearly belonged to Yuri. Even while bleeding profusely, Yuri never surrendered, still wielding his sword. Hernando's vision finally ended with Yuri collapsing in despair, but it was likely that the events leading up to that moment had started back then. An anecdote he had previously dismissed as a misunderstanding began to evolve into genuine suspicion. However, due to the prince's eccentric behavior during their last outing, Hernando decided to use the Mandate of Heaven observation formula. The miracle that followed left him unsure of when he would be able to use that power again. It was then that he realized Yuri had no fate. During the duel, Yuri remarked that he was ready and asked how long his opponent would keep swinging his sword at empty air. Jor, watching the exchange, wondered if Yuri was sure that no further preparation was necessary. Yuri responded confidently, stating that he was starting now. As his opponent agreed, Fior called for the trial to begin. Yuri rushed forward first, and the two began to clash swords. Fior made a comment about Hernando, which Hernando acknowledged. Fior then asked Hernando what he thought the outcome of the duel would be. Hernando watched as Yuri ended his opponent's strikes and replied that he didn't know. Fior, intrigued, asked if Hernando had come to Brielle to follow Heaven's will and if a time had come for him to leave. Hernando denied this, and Fior relaxed, relieved that Hernando was not leaving. Hernando expressed his gratitude, acknowledging how highly they thought of a humble magician like him. Fior remarked that excessive humility invited misfortune and suggested that there was nothing to worry about. Hernando then asked who the king thought was stronger. Fior looked at Yuri's opponent and mentioned that Yuri was the weaker one. Hernando understood how the king saw it and agreed, thinking the same way. He had come to Brielle because of what he believed to be the will of heaven and the strongest person on the continent. Someone who could control the world's fate was right there. However, since the sword hadn't been drawn, Hernando felt there was no longer a reason to remain. He mentioned that he thought it was time for him to leave. Just then, Yuri's opponent rushed to attack. Yuri observed the move and remarked that it wasn't over yet. He then summoned his man of sword, wondering if it was time to end the fight and if the probing was sufficient. Yuri's speed increased and he swiftly attacked his opponent, landing a strike near his neck. The boy understood that he was about to die. Everyone watching was shocked by the sudden turn of events as Yuri placed his sword on the man's shoulder instead. With a smile, Yuri declared that he had won. The crowd cheered for him, and Hernando, reflecting on the situation, thought that following Heaven's will had led him to a place where he met the one who defied it. From the tip of Yuri's sword, the will of heaven that had been bestowed upon him was altered. Even Jor clapped for Yuri. Hernando continued to ponder the idea that life had become death and death had become life once more. All of Yuri's actions went against the fate decreed by heaven. Yet Yuri was a being who existed outside the world's fate. He was someone who transcended fate itself. Hernando couldn't help but feel a sense of awe, anticipating how Yuri would go on to change the world's fate from that moment onward. Hernando was so excited that he could hardly contain himself. 5 years later, a maid walked down the corridor, thinking about how everything had gone so smoothly. She wondered how she had even ended up in the wrong control zone and what would happen if she got caught. Just then, a boy approached her and asked if she was new and what she was doing. She quickly realized that the boy was from the Brielle family. She decided to stay calm and respond as her senior had taught her. The boy asked that what she was doing there. With his expression always so serious, he seemed to be the king. If he always smiled gently, then he must be the crown prince. And if he carried himself with a certain swagger, he might be the third prince. Before she could react, he angrily asked if she was mocking him. The maid wondered if he was indeed the third prince, and she quickly figured out that she had to be careful. He then asked if they had a royal guidebook or something, and mentioned that they needed to avoid a certain person at all costs. He added that now he was going to teach her a lesson. Just then, Yuri appeared and asked the boy what he was doing there. The maid thought to herself that the last person who had looked so confident and always carried his sword at his side must be the third prince. Yuri, noticing her confusion, asked if he was picking on her. Afterward, Yuri walked down the corridor, enjoying the cookies he had received. He thought to himself that the maid must have packed something tasty for him. As he walked, he reflected on Sosukshang, and even while holding a sword, used his mana to reduce the pressure in his hand. He realized that at least he had reached that level. It had been 5 years since he was pierced by Lauren's sword in his past life and then returned. Looking outside, he muttered to himself that it seemed the peaceful days were coming to an end, and things would likely get noisy soon. Yuri knocked on a door, asking if they were ignoring him, but no one responded. A guard standing nearby explained that everyone was too focused on the meeting to hear him and suggested he try knocking again. Yuri, growing frustrated, simply punched the door to break it open. He then interrupted the meeting, saying that he knocked, but no one responded, and it seems he might have knocked a bit too hard. The guard pointed out that it wasn't really knocking at all. Yuri then told his father that he would attend the meeting as well. He sat down and casually said to just continue the meeting. A man said that in their territory they didn't have any spare troops to send to the Alliance army. He then questioned whether it was right to ask if the Empire would ignore the request afterward. The man also asked if other territories couldn't contribute more soldiers. The boy shouted back, calling it a completely irresponsible thing to say. As they argued, Yuri felt that everyone was simply calculating the gains and losses, just as it had happened in his previous life. The Empire had requested troops from various nations to form an orc subjugation force in the east. However, that alliance failed and the enraged orcs retaliated violently, pressuring the borders of all the participating nations except for the Empire. It was then that Yuri realized it had all been part of the Empire's scheme. They had lost many great knights because of it, including Leon, and he wouldn't let it happen again. A man had mentioned that they wouldn't send a single soldier from their land, to which another person asked if he thought they were overflowing with knights. Yuri shouted that he would join the Alliance army himself and insisted that they show some sincerity as well. He told them not to repeat the same mistakes and to fulfill their duties as nobles. Fewer smirked, understanding what Yuri was thinking. Yuri was practicing with a short sword when a boy approached him, asking if he was truly going to join the Alliance army. The boy wondered why Yuri felt the need to, as there was no reason for royalty to go. Yuri replied, as he always had, that it was the royal family's duty. The boy then said that he now understood Yuri's resolve and asked him to come back safely. He promised to protect the palace while Yuri was away. After the boy left, Bernard commented that it was a touching display of brotherhood. Yuri asked if Bernard wasn't worried about him. Bernard replied, confused, that as long as Yuri didn't do anything reckless, he was sure Yuri would return safely. Yuri thanked him for his generous assessment. Bernard still urged him to be careful, mentioning that orcs were tricky creatures, stronger and more cunning than expected. He especially warned about the orcs bearing Carrie's banner known as Orpal. Among the orcs, they were particularly vicious and powerful. Yuri reassured Bernard that it would be fine as he had a plan. Just then, Anna rushed over, saying that a guest had arrived and brought what Yuri had ordered. Yuri told Bernard that he had a very special plan in mind. Yuri met the man, who greeted him by introducing himself as the vice president of the Irene Trading Company. Yuri asked if Irene was around, to which the man replied that she was away on business, which was why he had come in her stead. Yuri wondered if she still ran around on her own and asked the man to tell her to hold back a little. The man explained that she insisted she was made for fieldwork. Yuri then wondered if that was all the man had come there for. The man denied it, saying he had brought the item Yuri had requested. Yuri appreciated it, thinking that the four-wheel blade was finally in his hands. The man asked if it was really a valuable item, as it just looked like an ornamental dagger to him. Yuri replied that it was indeed very valuable, a relic imbued with ancient magic. He made the blade move on its own, which shocked the man. As the blade got closer, Yuri told the man not to worry, as it wouldn't kill him. The man asked if Yuri was moving it with his mana and admitted he hadn't realized Yuri was so powerful. Yuri asked if the man thought he just played around every day. The man didn't respond and instead asked again what it was. Yuri replied that it was nothing, then asked him to send his regards to Irene. He also requested that the man provide a report on how the Imperial branch was progressing the next time he visited. The man agreed and was now leaving. As Yuri relaxed, Asana appeared and he sensed her presence. He asked about Goryo, and Asana replied that she had given him the warning as Yuri had asked and had left a pillow by Goryo's side while he was sleeping. Yuri appreciated it, noting that Goryo was likely looking for a chance to get his hands on Irene's money. Asana then asked if Yuri was really going to join the Allied forces. When Yuri confirmed, she told him to be careful. Yuri remarked that she spoke as if it concerned her. She wondered what he meant, and Yuri revealed that she would be joining him as well if she thought she could keep up. She responded that anywhere was better than where she came from. Yuri told her to stay in touch. With that, she disappeared. A few days later, it was the day of the deployment. Yuri was getting ready in his armor when his brother asked him to come back safely. Yuri reassured him, saying not to worry because he was invincible and would make the name of Brielle shine again. He also told his brother to take a break from studying and look after his health. The boy agreed, then hugged Yuri, telling him to take care of himself. Yuri promised he would surely return. Fior stood on the stage, and as Yuri approached, Fior asked if he was nervous. Yuri denied it, and Fior instructed him to turn around. All the soldiers standing before Yuri were now his responsibility. Yuri thought to himself that not everyone would come back alive, but at the very least, he would not allow them to die meaningless deaths, nor would he let the past repeat itself. His father asked if he was ready to bear the burden. Yuri nodded in agreement, and his father told him to take it one step at a time. Then, Yuri felt something different, an intense killing intent. His body froze, reacting instinctively. He saw someone standing before him, walking toward him. Yuri wondered what it was and realized that if he tried to run, he would die, and there would be no way to reject it. Suddenly, he felt a surge of power and was able to summon the Mala sword, striking with it in a flash, just as his father had done. His father commented that Yuri had endured it well. Yuri pulled his sword back, thinking it was just as it had been. His father then said there was no need for further words, asking Yuri to come back alive. Yuri agreed and turned toward the soldiers, telling them he was the third prince of Brielle. He asked them all to trust him and advance together. They cheered in response. The scene shifted to a prison, where an orc was held captive. Sigurd stood there, looking at the prisoner. He muttered to himself that it had been 5 years, and he couldn't stop thinking about the third prince, Yuri.